Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to make some kind of Italian meatball creamy polenta bowl with some blueberry lime scones. So I've got 2 cups of water in my pan, and I'm going to add 2 cups of whole milk. So we're going to have a kind of a nice creamy polenta. We're going to add some mozzarella and parmesan cheese at the end, so it'll be just this delicious kind of cheesy creamy polenta. And we're going to add in 1 cup of polenta or corn grits. Okay. And we're going to let these come to a simmer, and then we'll just cook on low, simmering for about 20 to 30 minutes until they're nice and creamy but thick. I'm going to give it a little stir, and then we're going to just add in also a little bit of salt, about a teaspoon of salt. And then we're going to stir occasionally. Once it comes to a boil, we'll turn it down, and then we'll just stir occasionally. Okay. While that is warming and heating, let's get to making our scones. We're going to start out with our dry ingredients because we need to cut our butter into it. So we're going to use 2 cups of all-purpose flour. So 1 and 2. Slide these over here. And we're going to add in a 1/2 cup of granulated sugar. And then 2 teaspoons of baking powder. So let me get my lid down on here first. So 2 teaspoons of baking powder. 1 and 2. And then we're going to add in a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. This is going to be for our dry ingredients for our blueberry lime scones. And then I'm going to give a nice little stir with my pastry cutter to mix all of this up. And then we're going to cut in 1 stick of cold butter. So a 1/2 cup of cold butter. We're going to cut into our flour. And then we're going to use our pastry cutter to chop it up smaller than the size of a pea. And this is going to be kind of our flaky base for our scones. There we go. So I always start off by kind of quartering our butter and then just like making little bits. It just makes it a little bit easier to hand cut it into it. You could also use a food processor for this if you wanted to. But it just works great. And then we'll also be using, when we do our wet ingredients, we're going to be using our sourdough discard in it. Okay. So now we're going to chop our cold butter into our flour mixture until we have no pieces bigger than a pea. There we go. And I always just kind of do a push and a twist on it. But I'm excited. I'm going to use a little bit of blueberry powder in my scones today, in both the glaze and in the scones. So they'll actually have kind of like a light purplish blue color to them. I think they're going to be very pretty. Okay. I'm going to just push some of my butter out. And then before I cut some more, I'm going to turn down my liquid over here. I'm going to give it a nice stir. I'm going to turn it down all the way to a 3 out of 10. So a low, kind of slow. That way it can thicken up. But you want to bring it to a nice boil first. There we go. Now let's finish cutting in our butter into our flour. And again, we're aiming for no pieces bigger than a pea. And I do have my oven preheated to 400 degrees, so we will be baking them right at that. Turn that down even lower. go. Okay, looks like we've got our butter all cut in here. Give this a nice little stir. Want to get it down to a nice simmer. And let's do our wet ingredients now. So, and this is going to be for our blueberry lime scone, which will be kind of like our dessert to our Italian kind of meatball ragu over a creamy, cheesy polenta. So we are going to start with, where did my measuring cup go? Right over here. A half a cup of sourdough discard. So I'm going to give it a good stir. And then we're going to measure out a half a cup. We're going to add this to our bowl here. There we go.
Do you have a question? Who taught you how to cook?
I was really kind of self-taught. I mean, I learned some from my mom, but I was really interested in cooking when I was young at 13. And so I watched all the shows, I read magazines, and I just practiced. So really just self-taught. And I've been doing it ever since I started actually taking over the family dinners when I was 13. And I have just loved it ever since. Got a little bit of a bubble here, but look how lovely our polenta is thickening up here and nice and creamy. So I'm just going to turn it down super low, and we're going to let it kind of warm up. I'm going to pop the lid on just a little bit so it doesn't bubble too much. Okay, now we're going to add in 1 egg to our mixture here. I'm going to get a spoon. I'm going to kind of pop the yolk here and give it a good stir. And mix it in. Then we're going to add in some cream and some lime juice and lime zest. There we go. So you just want to make sure that egg gets mixed in well. Now we're going to add in some lime zest from just 1 lime. You want to make sure you add that in before you juice it, because then it's harder to zest after you juice it. So here we go. And I'm actually using a cheese grater. It's a parmesan grater to zest my lime. It works so well. It's better than some of the other zesters out there. Here we go. So just kind of get all of that bright green skin off of your lime. It's going to add a lovely flavor to the blueberry lime scones. And I will say fresh lime zest is much better than the prepackaged dried lime zest. It just doesn't quite have the same flavor. Okay. And you're aiming for about, you know, almost a tablespoon of zest. So we're getting close to that. There. Because you just really want those flavors to pick up. And then we're going to cut our lime in half and add in the juice. So we've got our lime here, and then I'm going to just use my juicer. We're going to add in the juice of the whole lime. And this is going to add just a lovely flavor to our scones. Now, I will say the zest gives it and when you're baking it up, the zest gives it more of a lime flavor than the juice. But when we make our glaze, the lime juice will bring in a real zing on top, which will be lovely. So we're going to, there we go. Just make sure I get all of that liquid in there. Give it a good squeeze out. Don't want any of it to go to waste. Beautiful. And now we're going to add in 2 tablespoons of cream as well. And grab my cream from right over here. So we need 1, 2, and then before we give it a good mix, we're going to add in some blueberry powder, which is going to give it a lovely kind of purplish flavor. These are just freeze-dried blueberries that have been blended up into a powder. So we're going to add about a tablespoon. So this is a half a tablespoon. So we'll add 1 whole tablespoon in there. and we're going to give it a lovely mix. It will give it a nice light color to our scone mixture, but it's also going to give a nice vibrant color to our glaze. So we'll mix this up, and then we're going to add our wet mixture to our dry mixture, and we'll do our press and folds, get our shaping underway, and we'll add in our blueberries, of course. There we go. And this will also add another layer of, blueberry flavors to it. So let me get my thing out. We're going to add this in. Just make sure I scrape all of that good liquid in here. And you're going to come out with a dry shag before we kind of do our press and folds. So let's give it a good kind of mix. And then I'll dump it out on the counter and we'll do our press and folds after we mix in, of course, our blueberries. There we go. So we've got our dry shag up, which just kind of looks like a really flaky, chunky batter. But trust me, it will press and come together and form a nice puck in no time. We're going to add in about a cup of blueberries. If you want to, you can always take the extra time to have the blueberries, but I find that the results still, they're just as good and just as nice. You just don't have a blueberry quite as often. Come back here. We'll mix these in. You got to be careful. The blueberries will roll away. Lost one to the ground. No worries. Okay. And now this is where we're going to do our press and our fold. And until we get our puck shaping those blueberries, you just want to keep pushing them in. Unfortunately, with the blueberries, there's just no way to get around them escaping, but they're going to be delicious in our scones.
Probably would have helped if you had them.
It could have helped, yes. If I had them, they wouldn't have been as rolly. But I just love that big blueberry pop in the scones, just like in a muffin, where you just get this big blueberry juicy gooey part. I will say it is, last time I made blueberry scones, they did not quite roll as much. But you know what? Tis the way. We work with it for the delicious outcome. There you go. You see how we've got this in there? The trick is don't knead it, fold and press. Every fold and press creates a nice flaky layer. There we go. And you see how it comes together and it shapes into our kind of our pucks. So I'm now going to divide it kind of into two. So we've got one over here, one over here. There we go. Ha ha. Escapees. We'll press it down. And we'll get this one pressed and folded as well into a lovely little puck. And you can see that blueberry powder just gave it a very light kind of purple color to it. Okay, let me get my baking sheet with my parchment paper on it. And then I'm going to do is you want to push your pucks into about an inch in height. And then I'm going to slide my kind of pastry cutter underneath. We're going to add each one to our parchment paper. And no worries if you have like a little bit flake off, just kind of push it back in. When that butter melts in there, it will kind of all come together. And now I'm going to cut each one into eighths. That way we'll have 8 kind of equal sections. So they'll be like a cute little mini scone. And I just find they cook up better when you do a mini scone versus big scones. Now, if you wanted to, you can make one huge puck and then cut it into 8. But it takes a little bit longer, and I find that it dries out a bit more. So the little ones have just a better consistency and texture. So you get to eat 2 instead of 1. There we go. And now what you're going to do, and this is important, make sure you pull them out so that they have space to bake up and kind of crisp up on the edges. So you just kind of delicately pull them out and push them apart. There we go. That piece of blueberry stuck to me. We'll put it back on there. Perfect. And then we're going to brush with a little bit of cream and sugar. Let me just wash my hands. And that will give them a nice golden brown crusting on the outside. Okay. Grab a smidge of our cream here. Don't need much, not even like a tablespoon, just enough to really get the top of your pastry brush wet. And we're going to brush it over each one. Just really more like a dab. And then we'll sprinkle with some granulated sugar, and then we'll pop these in the oven to bake. And they will be just delicious. And then we'll make a lovely blueberry lime glaze with them. And then while they're baking, we're going to prep up our lunch today, which will be an Italian kind of meatball ragu over some creamy, cheesy polenta. Give it a quick little sprinkle of sugar. You don't need much, less than a tablespoon for all of these. But it gives you just a little sugar crust at the top, a nice little crunch, and it's just wonderful, since scones aren't naturally that sweet. Okay, let's go get these popped in the oven. I have my oven preheated to 400 degrees. Get that errant blueberry before I step on it. And they're going to bake for about 18 minutes. Put them right here on top. And beautiful. Set my timer so I don't forget, because otherwise I will forget. And let's start working on lunch. Put this lid right over here so I don't knock it. Okay. Just slide a few things out of my way so it's not quite as messy.
You have a question? Will there be dinner tonight?
There will be dinner tonight. So last night we had lots of soccer. I felt like we've had lots of soccer recently, but lots of soccer. And we didn't get home until like after 9 o'clock. So we had Chinese for dinner last night. We're going to take one slice of bread before I crack my egg in here. And we're going to soak it in some cream until it's nice and soggy. And this is going to be the binder for kind of our Italian meatball patties. So we're going to let it get nice and wet. It doesn't need to be drenching in it because you don't want your paste to be too thin. And then we're going to add in one egg. Here we go. And now we're going to add in our seasonings. We're going to add in about a tablespoon of basil. Woo, lost the lid. Good thing we're going to use more basil. We're going to add in about a tablespoon of Italian seasoning. Be more gentle on this one. And then we're going to add in about a tablespoon of everything Italian. It's a bit spicy, but it will give a nice little kick to these meatballs. So they have a lot of red chili peppers in it, or like the little things in there. So they're spicy but delicious. And then we're going to add in some garlic salt, about 2 teaspoons of it. Okay, we're going to give this just a nice little smush. I'm going to kind of push it through your fingers, make a little herby paste. I think it's called a panade, where you make a bread and like cream paste and egg paste for your like meatballs or stuff like that. If you want to get all fancy. Okay, so we've got our little paste. And then we're going to add in some ground beef. I've got it's around a pound, maybe a little bit more. I didn't really measure it when I prepackaged it. I just put it in there. But I'm aiming for around a pound of ground beef. And we're going to just smush all of our herby paste into our little meatballs here. And then we're going to make little nice kind of patties with them. We just want them to form up and get all those seasonings mixed around. Okay. There we go. Beautiful. And I'm just making sure I'm mixing until kind of I see everything has been dispersed evenly. And you can see it just comes and it holds together. So that panade really acts as a binder for it. Okay, we're going to let that sit for a second. I'm going to give my hands a quick wash. Okay, and now we're going to cut up some onions and let them start caramelizing before we start shaping our meatballs. That way they can caramelize it. I forgot my knife. So, got my nice chef knife here. We're going to cut off the ends of each of our onion here and just remove this whole outer bit. And I always say, don't even work to try to peel off and get as close. Just take that whole first layer. It saves you time. And that top layer of onion can be a bit chewy at times. And then we're just going to do a nice kind of, small dice to it. Nothing too large. Because we're going to saute these up and kind of caramelize them nicely to start making our little bit of our like kind of ragu sauce for this. There we go. And then we'll add a little bit, about 2 tablespoons of olive oil to my pan here. So I'm going to turn this on to about a 7. And we'll add in our olive oil and our onions and let those start to caramelize to really bring out the flavors before we start adding in some more veggies. There we go. Lost some onions. And I will say, make sure you take the time to caramelize your onions up on their own before adding stuff in. It just is much better flavor. Slide this around and take my tongs here. Coat my onions up in that olive oil. And take my tongs here. Coat my onions up in that olive oil. And then we're going to let them saute. While these saute, we're going to form our little meatball patties. So not a true meatball, but we're going to do little kind of patties that we're going to cook up on our frying pan that we'll be having with our little ragu. So just little babies.
Do you have any options yet for dinner?
I think we're going to have steak for dinner tonight.
Good choice.
Yes, I know my husband loves that choice. And my kid, my little Mother's Day card even has like my daughter Lena's, and I love it when you make steak for dinner. And I was like, I know you would have steak every single day, but I did buy a pack of steaks this week from Costco. So I think Friday night made it through the week. That is a good way to celebrate. Especially like my oldest daughter, she's in high school. She has exams next week, and then Thursday is everyone's last day of school. So it's like summer is almost here, and I cannot wait. I am done with waking up at 5:30 in the morning to get everyone up for school.
You have a comment from the chat that this makes up for salmon for the other
night. Yes. I do always try, but you know what? He had salmon. He was not happy. But for lunch, I made him hamburgers, bacon cheeseburgers. So I made sure he was well fed, and nobody is hurting for a meal in this house. Even my dog is like, they always get a little table scrap here and there. And I won't say that we give them the table scraps. These dogs are like the world's best acrobats. And they like fly through the air. They lunge. They get every scrap that even like remotely hits the floor. It's in their mouth in 2 seconds. And they just follow poor Jackie around. If he's eating something, they just follow him and they just take little nibbles off of the food in his hands. They're cute, but they're definitely little evil dogs. One of them, depending on how much he steals during the day, depends on how much food he gets at night in his dog dish. And sometimes he doesn't get any because he stole too much food. He's a little chunky monkey. Okay. There, we're gonna mow through and we'll saute these up so they'll be like little burger, like Italian meatball burger patties. I just thought it'd be kind of cool, a little bit different than a meatball. But we're going to fry them up on our skillet, which will give them a nice kind of crispier edge than if you do an oven bake, which I think will pair really well with the creamy polenta.
You got a question? What kind of dogs do you have?
We have two, and they are both greater, or not great, that's my old dogs. They're both King Charles Cavalier Spaniels. We used to have greater Swiss Mountain dogs. So we kind of went from one end of the spectrum to the other end. So we went from having a 150-pound dog to like, supposed to be a 15-pound dog, but I'm pretty sure Loki's closer to 25 pounds. He did get a haircut recently, so he's not in his Sherpa era anymore. But his hair gets really long, and he reminds me of the reindeer from the Grinch, the new Grinch, where it's that really fat reindeer. That's what he reminds me of. Here we go. Get the last of these out, and then we'll start sauteing them up. You could leave them in meatball forms, but they'll cook up faster and more evenly in a patty than if you leave them in a meatball form. In the oven, a ball works great, but on a skillet, these work a little better. And they're cute. Okay. There we go. One more. And then get my hands nice and washed. Always worse. The meatballs always make your hands so slimy. There. Okay. Let's give our onions a quick toss. Here. Bring this over here, get these ready. Let's check on our polenta, our kind of creamy polenta. You see how nice and lovely thick it is? Beautiful. We're going to add in cheese, mozzarella and parmesan cheese at the very end, but we want it to be nice and creamy. Okay. Let's put some olive oil in our frying pan over here to get ready to cook up our little mini burgers. Just about a tablespoon or so. You don't need too much. And then we're going to start prepping our veggies over here to go into our little ragu. We've got some baby bella mushrooms. We're just going to do some simple slicing on it. And then I'll toss them in with my onions in just a second. We also have zucchini, tomatoes, and some spinach. So it'll be kind of like not a true tomato sauce, but like a tomato base in it. So it'll have that nice acidity to it, which will marry well with the onions and the mushrooms. And I also have some sweet peppers because I love sweet peppers. And these will all be great textures when you add them to the ragu, to the polenta. They'll just kind of cut up that creaminess. Okay. Let's put a little bit of garlic in our onions over here. Probably like a teaspoon or so. Do a little shake. There we go. And we'll give it a nice little stir. Garlic cooks up fast when it's by itself. So I always like to wait until my onions have a nicer, kind of golden color on it before I add it in. Otherwise, your garlic can burn up. And then I've got some little baby peppers here. These are sweet, so they're mild. They'll add just kind of that nice, savory taste to it, a little bit of a crunchier texture. Just throw them in at it as we go. You could use a big bell pepper if you wanted, but I love these little snacking peppers. You can get them in bulk at Costco, and Evie loves them as well. I'll put them in her lunch, but they stay fresh for a while. Here. And they don't have seeds, which is a bonus. Here we go. They are a bit more chopping though. And cut off the top of that one. And I don't even do a very big, they can remain a little bit bigger. They don't have to be super small in there. There. We'll get these sauteing. Okay. Give it a little stir, kind of get them nice and coated up. And our olive oil over here looks like it should be nice and warm. I'm going to turn my heat down to about a 6. And we're going to just start adding these patties in.
Do you have a question? Do you wash your vegetables first?
I do wash my vegetables first. I kind of go through and I wash them all. And that's why they're all out of their packages and sitting out. The only things I don't wash first are like the salads or the herbs that have already been pre-washed. But yes, I do wash everything. Pretty much I do it right before the stream, so I'm not sitting over there washing everything. There we go. We're gonna just put our first kind of layer of little patties in. Now I'm gonna go give my hands a quick wash. And then we're gonna let them kind of sizzle up nicely. There we go. Nice little stir. And then I'm gonna add in our mushrooms. There we go. We'll have these start to kind of saute. And then we're going to chop up our zucchini, and then we'll add our tomatoes in last, because tomatoes are full of a lot of water. And if you add them in first, then you won't get a good, like, crispy sear on any of your veggies.
You have a question? Someone just joined and asked what the patties are.
The patties are kind of like a spicy Italian meatball. But we made them in patty form, and we're kind of, frying them up on both sides. That will go in our creamy polenta bowl. But they're made with ground beef, egg, bread, Italian seasonings, a little bit of spicy Italian seasonings. So just be delicious. Pair well with our little ragu we're making here. Okay. Let's get my zucchini chopped up. Cut off things. And I'm going to quarter my zucchini first, and then we'll add it in here. And I also zucchini is typically one of the last vegetables I'll add in too, because zucchini also has a lot more water. So I typically start with my onions, let them caramelize up first. Then I will do the peppers because they're firmer, followed by, the mushrooms. So I start with the firmer to the soft, or to the more waterlogged towards the end. There we go. Give it a nice little toss. Beautiful. Let's see, I'm going to rotate my pan over here and let those kind of cook up. It's a little bit hotter on that side. And now I'm going to take my tomatoes, pop those off the vine. I always get a big box of them from Costco. And then we're just going to do a simple kind of dice on these. I'll take out their little, where the vine comes in, because that part never gets soft. It's just going to remain hard and chewy. So you just poke your knife in and give it a little twirl. And you should be able to get that out right away. And then we can give it a nice little dice. There we go. And if you don't have fresh tomatoes, you could always use canned diced tomatoes for this. I always try to use fresh first before canned, but I will say canned tomatoes work really well too. Okay. And we're just going to give them kind of just a loose chopping here. Because when they start to cook in the pan, they're going to, kind of reduce down anyways as their natural liquid sweats out. So you just want to make sure you've got, you don't have any tomato skins that are going to be super big. There we go. Nice little chop. We're going to take a pause for 1 second, and we're going to just start flipping these patties. Look at that. Nice little sears on them, nice golden brown crust on them, which will give them that nice little perfect chewy taste to them. Lovely. Flip these over, and then perfect timing because we can actually go to the oven and remove out our scones and let them sit for a second. I'm going to turn mine down just a little bit and grab a trivet out. We're going to pull out our sourdough blueberry lime scones. They are gorgeous. You can see those popping blueberries there, which is why I don't like to cut them in half because I think they pop so lovely. On this, we use zest from a whole lime, juice from a lime, fresh blueberries, and a little bit of blueberry powder. And we're going to make a lovely lime and blueberry glaze with them. But they have a nice little sugar coating on the top that baked them up nicely with the ground crust. So they'll be absolutely delicious. And we'll glaze those up in just a second. Okay. Let's give our veggies here a quick toss. And before I finish chopping up the rest of my tomatoes, we're going to add in about a teaspoon and a half of dried basil. You could use fresh basil if you have it. And then about a teaspoon and a half of Italian spices. There we go. And then we're going to want about a tablespoon of garlic salt. This is going to season up our whole sauce. Here we go. And we're going to add a little bit of cream, and you have the natural liquid in here, but it's got to season up all of those veggies as well as the nice kind of juicy liquid that's going to pour over our creamy, cheesy polenta. So think of it kind of like you want it to be a little bit, you want it to have a nice flavoring. And we're going to add in our tomatoes. There we go. And we're going to give this a nice toss and really mix it around. I'm going to let those kind of steam up and glaze. And then we're going to take our meatballs out in just a second here. Okay. Well, let me get a bowl for our meatballs. And I will say the second side does not need to cook nearly as long as the first because they're already cooked primarily through. Now you can do these in the oven. The only thing is if you do them in the oven, they won't have quite as crispy of an edge on them, which is nice. I like, so here we go. Let's add in our last bit of patties, but those are our Italian meatball like patties that we're pan frying. And they're going to go with our creamy, cheesy polenta. Okay.
Do you have a question? Where do you get the dishes and bowl stuff?
One second. They are from Target, actually. They're part of, one's Threshold. The plates are Threshold. The bowls are part of the Joanna Gaines Magnolia, like Hand and Hearth collection. I really like them because they've got that kind of rustic farmhouse. They're really heavy though, but they are sturdy and nice. It's funny, I bought them a couple years ago, and my only regret is I didn't buy enough of them because now I can't find them anymore. And when I bought them, I only had 3 kids. Now I have 5 kids, and now I'm sitting here and I'm like, I have only 7. And I said, most of the time we're feeding 9, but Jackie doesn't get a plate right now because he's 18 months, and who gives an 18-month-old a plate? But I'm like, oh, what am I going to do? I'm like, I don't want to have to buy new ones because I actually love these to death. But I'm not sure what I'm going to do when they get older and if they break one. Okay, we're going to mix in some of our cheese into our polenta right now. We're going to do it towards the end. Where's my cream? We're going to add a little bit of cream. About like 1/4 of a cup. And then we're going to do about 1/2 cup of mozzarella and 1/2 cup of parmesan. I'm just going to do a nice handful. And we cooked our polenta with half milk, half water. So like 2 cups of water, 2 cups of milk, and a little bit of salt. So it's a nice kind of creamy polenta. And now I'm going to just mix these up. And this is going to be a really like cheesy, creamy polenta base that will pour our ragu and have our Italian little meatballs over. And it will be just absolutely fantastic. And then we'll have our blueberry lime scones as a side with them. And then we're going to make our glaze for that in just a second. So look at this. Beautiful. Nice and cheesy. Perfect. This is, and if you've never had polenta before, I mean, it's very similar to grits. Grits typically use white corn instead of yellow, but it has that kind of creamy, a little bit of gritty texture to it. You can actually make patties and fry them up if you want, but it's delicious. Okay. We're going to add in a little bit of spinach to our ragu over here. Just about 2 handfuls. It will shrink up when we add it. And then towards the end, we'll add our cream. But I don't add my cream until the very end because with the tomato juices and high heat, it can cause your cream to curdle in there and it just won't be as lovely. And then we're going to whip up our glaze for our scones. Let's get this going in here. And then I'm going to turn it down nice and low to about a 2, 3. We're going to let it simmer. Okay. Let's get this out of my way. And I'll grab a bowl for our glaze here. And my powdered sugar. I should have everything else over here. Perfect. We're going to start with our lime zest and lime juice. So we're going to add it into our bowl right here. And you don't need a full lime. I'm just going to say probably just half your lime. You don't want it too zesty because, the lime zest is a little bit firmer. And if you get too much, you'll have a lot of chunks in it, which could take away. But you definitely want some. So just about, it's going to be about maybe a teaspoon, a little less. But it will give you that nice tart flavor. And then we're going to add in the juice of 1 lime. There we go. Really make sure you get in there. You want to get all of that fresh juice out there because you're looking for about a tablespoon, give or take. There we go. And don't worry about getting the pulp in there. That will just add lovely flavor to your glaze. There we go. Over here. Give my hands a quick rinse. I'll grab a fork to mix our glaze up with. And then I'm going to give, before we do that, I'm going to give a flip of our little patties over here. There we go. Got this nice kind of crispy edge on them. Push these over there. It's a little hotter on that side. There we go. We're going to let them cook up. And these will be perfect. Now, before we add in our cream, because you don't want to add it in right now or it will curdle, we'll add in our powdered sugar and a little bit of our blueberry powder. So this is just freeze-dried blueberries that have been pulverized. We're going to add in about a half a teaspoon. This is going to give a nice mild blueberry flavor, but a gorgeous color. And then we're going to start with a half a cup or so of powdered sugar. And then we're going to kind of mix it around. And then once we've got a kind of a good mix, we'll add a little bit of cream. And that cream will just kind of cut on the super tanginess of the lime juice. Makes it a little bit creamier and lovely. But you want to make sure it's mixed with a little bit of sugar first. Otherwise, it can curdle right away. There we go. You see it just has this lovely blue, purplish color to it. We're going to add about a tablespoon of cream. Give this a nice kind of mix. And then we'll add in a little bit more powdered sugar because we're aiming for the consistency of Elmer's glue. And that's what we're going to drizzle over our blueberry lime scones. So just about, you need about a cup of powdered sugar altogether. So I started with a half a cup. Now we're going to add in our second, like half a cup. And I will say a little bit of liquid really dissolves the powdered sugar. So you can see there's only about 2 tablespoons max of liquid in here, but it will dissolve through all of that powdered sugar. Okay. Beautiful. Okay. Now this is, you see how we've got a nice kind of thick run to it? That is perfect for drizzling over our scones. So let's get them. We're going to do a nice little drizzle. Let me grab a spoon and we'll drizzle them. But these is our blueberry lime glaze with that nice blueberry powder, and it gives it a really pretty color to it. And then that lime juice and lime zest is just going to be so bright and happy and delicious. But it really kind of makes the scones. Now you could always do it without, but I will say it really adds that extra flavor burst to it, because in the scones we have the juice of a whole lime and as well as the zest, but the zest is where you're going to get the most of the lime flavor in the scone. On the outside, this glaze is very limey and it's just perfect. There we go. Beautiful. And you always want to do it when your scones are still a bit warm, because when they cool down, it won't melt as nicely and coat as well. But voila. Okay.
Do you have a question? Where did you get the blueberry powder?
Amazon. They have a bunch of little baking powders you can get on there. You can add it to like all sorts of things. But it's just 100% blueberry powder. Okay. Let's finish off our ragu over here. We're going to add in our cream, and then we'll be ready to make our bowls. Okay, we're going to add in about, I want to say, a half a cup of cream, because you want this to be kind of like a creamy gravy that pours over your polenta. So you see how just lovely it looks and how delicious. All those spices in there. And then we're going to serve it with our Italian meat patties. Top. Okay. I think these are done. So let me turn them off. I'll put them in the bowl, and then we are going to serve up lunch. Okay. And nice and hot and toasty. Got 2 more coming. Okay, let's grab a bowl. And let me grab some serving utensils. And I will say, you're going to want a ladle for your veggie ragu over here so that it is all like, you can pour that sauce over it. Okay, and let me get my Parmesan cheese ready. Okay. We are going to start out with our cheesy polenta. We added in a half a cup of mozzarella cheese and a half a cup of Parmesan cheese. Look at this delicious cheese pull here. You can see they're going to be absolutely delicious. And then we're going to take our ragu and I'm going to pour it over. We're going to do 2 nice spoonfuls of it because this sauce is going to be amazing in that polenta. And then we're going to top off with our kind of Italian meatball patties using ground beef. We use some spicy Italian seasonings in here. Do 1 more for good measure. And last but not least, we're going to add a little bit of our shaved Parmesan to the top. And we'll have a delicious creamy polenta bowl with our Italian ragu, and our spicy meatball patties. And then, of course, for dessert, we'll have our delicious blueberry sourdough scones with lime zest and blueberry lime glaze in it. So just kind of a perfect little tartness to our rich little lunch here. But guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. We do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate one of our recipes, you can go to our page, find that video, rewatch it again, and cook along with me and hopefully make a great meal at home as well. Again, we also offer a membership if you want to join us on our journey to where we have more videos, more things about our family, exclusive our recipe cards, just more stuff about us if you want to join that thing. But again, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe.